In the winter of 1605, Sir Thomas Arundel, a Catholic squire from Wiltshire, having been a great favourite of the Protestant Queen Elizabeth, and having gained the title of Count from the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II for fighting the Turks in Hungary, and then having been imprisoned by Queen Elizabeth for his Catholic disloyalties, but later pardoned, and then imprisoned again, and after the death of Elizabeth, having been pardoned and received at court by the new Protestant king, James I. This Thomas Arundel did conceive a voyage of exploration and reconnaissance to the land of Virginia, also called the land of Norumbega. To what end this voyage was conceived, we can only guess, for there are many intrigues and plots to be uncovered. And in a short time, you will also be able to guess who went where and why. But the end that this voyage came to was not an end at all, but a beginning. It was the beginning of the English colonization of North America.
The Ojibwe are the people of the East, and one of their visionaries had this vision that there was going to be a tall white cloud coming this way, and it was important for us to leave this area. So at that point, the Ojibwe, they picked up and left the area, and the people that stayed behind were the guardians of the eastern door, the people of the dawn, the Wabanaki. They were the first people to meet the European voyagers with the giant white sails.
Before 1605, Europeans had been exploring and mapping the Americas for more than a century, looking for gold and for a passage to India and the spice isles of the South Pacific. In 1525, Estevan Gomez sailed up the Penobscot River, hoping to find a way to India. But there was none, nor was there any gold. So rather than go home empty-handed, he kidnapped 58 natives and took them back to the King of Spain. Now begins the story of George Weymouth, who surely must have known about Gomez and Verrazzano and all the other explorers who went before him.
A true relation of the most prosperous voyage made this present year, 1605, by Captain George Weymouth in the discovery of the land of Virginia, where he discovered 60 miles up a most excellent river, together with a most fertile land. Written by yours truly, James Rozier, a gentleman employed in the voyage.
In 1605, Captain George Weymouth and the Archangel was sent from England to the east coast of America to find a site for a new plantation. Landfall was made near Cape Cod, but because of adverse winds from the southwest, and in need of firewood and fresh water, Weymouth sailed with the wind, arriving at Monhegan Island on the 18th of May.
the next day being Whit Sunday. Because we rode too much open to the sea and winds, we weighed anchor about 12 o'clock and came along to the other islands more adjoining to the main, and in the road directly with the mountains, our captain found a convenient harbour, defended from all winds in an excellent depth of water for ships of any burthen, in 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 fathoms upon a clay ooze, very tough. Whitsun Monday, the 20th day of May, very early in the morning, our captain caused a pinnace, which we brought in pieces out of England to be carried ashore. While some were busied about her, others digged wells to receive the fresh water, which we find issuing down out of the land in many places.
On May 30th, 1605, at 10 in the morning, George Weymouth and 13 men departed from Allen Island to explore the coast. They returned the next morning at 10 a.m., having discovered up a great river.
One, as our captain verily thought, although he then concealed it, might possibly make a passage into, or very nigh, the South Sea.
But what river is James Roger talking about? Historians, and most of the people of mid-coast Maine, believe he's describing the St. George, that trends westward at Thomaston and empties into the Atlantic down by Port Clyde. But there are some, a very few, who believe he's describing the Penobscot that trends westward up at Bucksport before it empties into the head of Penobscot Bay.
Back when the Penobscot Nation was laying claim to its ancestral territory, we were looking at the Penobscot drainage as our homeland, and that took up 2/3 of the state of Maine. It's literally hundreds of miles of water. Today we live in houses connected to a road. Everybody has a driveway to the road, and that road connects to a bigger road that eventually connects to the interstate. In the old days, it would be you walk out of your wigwam, you've got a canoe right there, and it's on the banks of either a pond that has a stream that empties into a larger or a small river that empties into the Penobscot, and you're connected. A lot of the Penobscot clans, the eel, the dragonfly, the sturgeon, the eagle, come from animals that you find on the river. So the river just provides this whole source of physical life, but it goes much deeper than that. It becomes a spiritual connection. So the river really provides us with two forms of life, both physical and spiritual.
For 250 years, it was believed that on his first expedition, Weymouth explored 40 miles up to the Penobscot from Burnt and Allen Islands. But in 1858, Captain George Prince wrote that Weymouth explored up the St. George because a boat could not have rowed to Belfast and proceeded up the Penobscot and returned again in 24 hours. So Cyrus Eaton, our local historian, rewrote his history of Thomaston, Rockland, and South Thomaston to agree.
In 1905, the town of Thomaston celebrated the 300th anniversary of Weymouth's discovery of the St. George River. For the dedication ceremony on Allen Island, the Coast Guard placed the revenue cutter Woodbury at the disposal of the Maine Historical Society to transport members and their guests, including speakers of the day, naval officers, prominent citizens of Thomaston and Rockland, and members of the General Knox chapter of the DAR. At the dedication, there were also a dozen men in costume, playing Captain George Weymouth and members of his crew, together with 3 white men playing Indians. Among the day's speakers were William T. Cobb, Governor of Maine, Major General Joshua L. Chamberlain, and the poet, Miss Rita Creighton Smith.
Now, all you English gentlemen who scorn to live at ease, while there is fame for winning upon the ocean seas.
George Weymouth, an Englishman and commanding an English ship, while on a voyage of discovery to the New World, sailed up this river.
And kept in character by due observance of religious exercises.
Rise up and seek the western lands, as we to you shall tell, who sailed with Captain Weymouth in the brave Archangel.
And landing at the harbor's head was the first known white man to set foot on these shores.
And we found a noble river embayed on either hand, which brought us upward, league on league, into a pleasant land.
America was a wilderness, its inhabitants savage aborigines, and our country yet unborn.
A land enriched with fish and flesh, and excellent with trees, where we were well entreated by kindly savages.
Some races are better able to bring out the goods and uses of nature than others, and thus advance their own excellence.
We deemed that never Christians had trod upon that shore and seen our goodly river or stately hills before.
By what other right are we from the old world holding this new world once belonging to a simpler race?
A token for the Frenchmen, if from the north they come, that we, the men of England, have marked that spot for home.
Is not the survival of the fittest the right of the strongest?
And if they dare uproot it, God turn it to their loss. Beside St. George's River, we left St. George's Cross.
For the next 100 years, everyone believed Weymouth River had to be the St. George. Most people still do. Sherwood Cook disagrees. A retired lobsterman who for 50 years fished the waters that Weymouth explored, Sherwood has studied Roger's account of the voyage over and over again.
Yes.
In January of 2001, Sherwood went to the apprentice shop and asked if they would build a replica of the Light Horseman, the boat Weymouth used to explore the coast, and then make the trip from Allen Island to the mouth of the Penobscot and back to see if it could be done in 24 hours. The problem was there were no existing plans for the Light Horseman.
This is a device for finding out how wide a rowboat should be, a big one, how deep it should be, how high the seat should be from the bottom, how long the oars should
Half
be.
amount of time. 6 hours of tide, you could probably double the distance. That gives you, what, 22 hours?
We think we get to there in 24 hours.
No, we want to get here in 12 hours and return in another 12 hours. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
You want to?
That was the initial concept.
12 hours in a rowboat. That's ideal.
Well, that's what we
Okay, now I'm buying the thing that their miles were inflated. It had to have been.
It isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy thing.
What if we just ignored the mileage is obviously bogus. There's no way they could row 80 miles in 24 hours.
No, I think they can.
This is why we're building a fast boat.
Vancouver expedition out on the west coast, where you know this, the reconstruction. The first rowboat that they built could be rowed at a constant speed of 4.5 knots and sailed at 6.
They didn't sail.
Oh, no.
They sailed.
You're absolutely correct. There's nothing in Roger's account that mentions a mast or sail.
You know, it stands to reason that every boat that floated at that time carried a sail.
I think so.
I mean, you just didn't use human power if you have to.
not
But on the
sure.
other hand,
Especially if they're wearing armor, protecting themselves from Indians.
In keeping with his original plan, Weymouth captured 5 natives and took them back to England in order to learn as much as possible about the New World and use them as guides for subsequent voyages. Descendants of those 5 natives still live along the coast of Maine and New Brunswick. One of them is Donald Soktoma.
My great-grandfather was sort of the story keeper, you can call him the wampum keeper of the tribe. And wampum's the way of communicating between the tribes. But he passed on the legends and the stories to another generation of people. And when I was asked questions as I was growing up about my history, I couldn't answer it. That sort of drove me to follow my great-grandfather's footsteps of sharing the history as much as I can. Maybe be the person that walks in two worlds and act as a voice for the tribe and for the outside world, and to bring it to a point where they understand each other. Birch bark is really one of the sacred objects that have helped all the Wabanaki tribes survive for thousands of years. And the story goes that Gluskab wanted to help the Wabanaki tribes, the Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, Maliseet, and Micmac, survive good on the land. So he showed the native people how to utilize birch bark by making dishes, making tools with birch bark. And finally, he said that it's time to make a birch bark canoe.
Offer this tobacco to the Creator, to Mother Earth, and to the birch bark, which we are going to use for our Gweden, our canoe project. And I ask each and every one of us to do that also. Tahoe. Tahoe.
Buliwan Kachiniwas.
Birch bark canoe is our connection to our ancestors and to the higher power. We're going back to the use of the birch bark. We're going back to our connections, to our origins. So it's more than just building a canoe. It's getting in touch with the higher power, getting in touch with nature. And then it's cultural revival. It's going to be something that our grandchildren are going to look at and say, my grandfather made that canoe. And it's not going to be lost.
Yeah, that's good. Do the shorter one.
Okay. Look at that right there.
It's going.
Okay. Not helping it.
For the last 150 years, most people have believed that the St. George is Weymouth's great river. That's what the history books say, and that's what children learn in school. But let's consider if that's really possible. Rozier writes that Weymouth discovered 60 miles up a most excellent river. Now, let's look at the St. George River. From Weymouth's anchorage at Allen Island, it's 13 miles to Thomaston, where the river trends westward. And then another 5 miles from Thomaston to Warren, where the rapids begin. The farthest anyone can row or sail from Allen Island up the St. George is 18 miles.
We paddle the St. George River in springtime, and it's a great little stream. It's a lot of fun. I wouldn't call it a river. Whereas the St. George, you can only race it in the spring because of the snow melt provides just enough water for us to race canoes. But in the summer, you can walk across it and not get your ankles wet.
Remember that Weymouth thought the river he discovered might be the Northwest Passage. But in one respect, the St. George aptly fits Rozier's account. The bordering land is a most rich neighbor, neither mountainous nor rocky, but verged with a green border of grass that doth make tender unto the beholder of her pleasant fertility.
Why would someone then, and for so many years, would they interpret it as being